What would you do if the person who abandoned you ended up watching your entire life flip overnight? How do you react when the world sees you as disposable, but the universe drops a $47 million inheritance into your hands? This is how homelessness, humiliation, and one quiet condition changed everything for me. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Michael Thompson, and I used to think rock bottom was just a phrase people threw around when they were having a bad week. Now I know rock bottom has a smell. It smells like old vegetables, spoiled milk, and wet cardboard. I was standing behind a grocery store, my shoulders pressed to the cold brick wall, staring into a metal dumpster. The morning air in the city was sharp, and every breath felt like I was pulling ice into my lungs. My reflection in the greasy metal side looked nothing like the man I used to be. My beard was uneven. My hair, once neat for office life, stuck out from under a faded baseball cap. My jacket had a rip in one sleeve where stuffing poked through like white straw. A worker came out the back door with 2 black trash bags. He barely glanced at me. He just said I needed to move a little so he could toss them into the dumpster. His voice had no anger, just that flat tone people used when they wanted you to disappear without making a scene. I stepped aside and watched the bags land with a heavy thud on top of the pile. The smell puffed out like a wave. He went back inside and let the door slam behind him. I waited a moment, then pulled myself up onto a low crate and leaned over the edge of the dumpster. I didn't want to be there. I don't think anyone dreams of this when they're a kid. But hunger doesn't care about pride. I picked through the bag slowly, using a torn glove so my skin wouldn't touch anything too disgusting. Most of it was useless. Torn packaging, raw chicken, something wet and gray that I didn't want to identify. Finally, I saw a plastic container of salad mix. The sell-by date was yesterday. The lid was cracked on one side, but the greens inside looked okay. I also found a pack of bread rolls in a bag with a small tear. I wiped them on my sleeve, even though I knew it wouldn't change much. A door somewhere banged, and I froze, waiting for someone to yell at me. Nobody did. A car drove past the alley. Music blared for 2 seconds, then vanished as it turned the corner. I climbed down carefully, my knees aching. I used to walk into an office with a security badge and a fresh shirt. Now I climbed out of dumpsters with food in my arms. Life can move fast when it wants to. I put the salad and rolls into my old backpack. The zipper stuck halfway. It had done that even back when I still had a job, but back then I would just say I'd replace it soon. Soon had expired a long time ago. On the sidewalk, the city was waking up. Office workers in clean coats and polished shoes rushed past, eyes on their phones or the crosswalk light, pretending not to see me. I didn't blame them. I used to pretend too. I walked toward a cafe a few blocks away. They had outlets near the floor and sometimes didn't notice if you sat for a while with a small coffee. My phone was old, but it still worked. I kept it off most of the time to save battery. I needed it in case someone from a shelter, a temp job, anyone called. Inside the cafe, it was warm. The smell of fresh coffee hit me like a slap and a hug at the same time. I stood in line, counting the crumpled bills in my pocket. Enough for one small black coffee, no milk, no sugar. Luxury was anything extra, and I didn't have room for luxury. The barista gave me the quick, polite smile people give when they are trained to smile at everyone. I paid, took my cup, and found a corner seat near an outlet. I plugged in my phone and watched the little charging symbol appear. That tiny icon felt like hope. I scrolled through my messages, mostly old ones from before everything went wrong. Friends asking how I was, my boss sending project updates, Emily texting about dinner plans, grocery lists, silly memes. I still hadn't deleted those. I didn't know if that made me strong or pathetic. My divorce had been final 3 months ago. The job loss came 6 months before that. The rent had lasted a while with my savings, and then it hadn't. Emily said she couldn't live like this, meaning she couldn't live with me being broke, uncertain, and tired all the time. Her exact words the last time I saw her in our apartment were burned into my brain. She said no one would ever love a broke man like me. She'd laughed when she said it, like it was a joke, and I was being sensitive. Then she took her suitcase, her nice clothes, her perfume, her laptop, and left. I focused on the coffee. It was hot and bitter and good. At least my hands stopped shaking from the cold. My phone had no new messages, no missed calls, just silence. I was scrolling through job listings I could barely apply for without an address when I heard a woman's laugh. I knew that sound. It was light and sharp, and it pulled my head up before I even thought about it. Emily was at the counter. Her hair was styled the same way she used to wear it on special occasions, smooth and shiny around her shoulders. She wore a cream coat that I had helped her pick out on our last big shopping trip when money still meant choices instead of survival. Beside her stood a man I recognized from pictures she forgot to delete from her social media. Ryan, personal trainer, fitness coach, guy who posted shirtless photos with motivational quotes. I remembered the first time I saw his name pop up on Emily's phone. She told me he was just helping her with her workout routine. I had believed her because trust was easier than suspicion. Now he stood next to her, one arm around her waist like he had always belonged there. I tried to look away. I really did. But then Emily turned and saw me. For a second, her face froze. Her eyes ran over my unshaved jaw, my old jacket, my cracked shoes. I could see her taking it all in, cataloging every failure like she was scanning a price tag. Then she smiled. Not the warm smile she used to give me. This one was thin and amused. Ryan followed her gaze and spotted me. He grinned wide, like someone just handed him a microphone and a crowd. He said something to her. I couldn't hear the exact words, but I saw the shape of them. Then he laughed and turned toward me fully. "Wow," he said, loud enough that people in the line glanced over. "You weren't joking." Emily put a hand lightly on his arm. "That used to be my arm. That used to be my hand." I looked back at my coffee. Staring at the dark surface felt safer. If I made myself small enough, maybe they'd get bored, maybe they'd order their drinks and leave. But people like Ryan loved an audience, and this cafe was full of them. He walked over to my table with the kind of slow, confident steps you only learn when life has never really hit you yet. Emily followed, staying half a step behind. "Michael," she said, her tone syrup-sweet. "Didn't expect to see you here." I gave a small nod. My throat felt dry. "Morning," I managed. My voice sounded smaller than I liked. Ryan rested one hand on the back of my chair, leaning down a little like he was talking to a child. Emily's eyes were bright. In that moment, I understood something ugly. This was entertainment for them. "Guess she was right," Ryan said. "You really did end up. What was it you said?" Emily tilted her head, pretending to think. "On the street," she answered, just loud enough for the nearby tables. "I said you'd end up on the street." Somebody behind us rustled a newspaper. Another person's spoon clinked against a cup. I could feel their eyes. Not all of them, but enough. I didn't respond. There wasn't much to say. Ryan chuckled. "Man, this is rough. You know, when she told me you lost your job, I thought you'd bounce back. But you really let it go, huh?" He was looking at my backpack, at the torn zipper, at the edge of the salad container just visible inside. His gaze lingered there a little too long. Emily sighed dramatically. "He always thought everything would just work itself out," she told Ryan, but she was really talking to the room. "No plan, no hustle." I thought about the late nights at the office, the extra shifts, the projects I'd taken on when the company was struggling. Apparently that didn't count as hustle anymore. "He looks tired," Ryan added. "You sleeping somewhere at least? Or just wherever?" His voice dipped at the end, like wherever was a joke. I swallowed. "I manage," I said quietly. Ryan laughed again and straightened up. "Well, guess this is what happens when you don't keep up, man," he said. "No one wants a broke guy holding them back, right?" Emily smiled. That smile used to mean safety. Now it meant something else. "He'll be fine," she told Ryan. "He always figures something out, just not with me." They turned away like I was no more interesting than the empty chair beside me. Emily's perfume brushed past my nose as they walked back to the counter. It was the same scent she wore on our wedding day. I stared at the table. The wood grain swam a little in my vision. I took a long sip of my coffee just to have something to do with my hands. When I stood up to leave, my knees cracked. I unplugged my phone. The battery icon showed 23%. Enough for a while. As I stepped past the line, I heard Ryan's voice again behind me, low, but not low enough. He said I was proof some people just aren't built for real life. Emily laughed. I didn't stop. I didn't defend myself. I just walked out of the cafe and back into the cold air. Outside, the sky was a flat gray sheet. I headed toward the park where I usually spent the afternoons. On the way, I passed people carrying laptop bags, grocery bags, gym bags. Everyone had someplace to be. I drifted among them like a loose thread. At the park, I sat on a worn wooden bench. The paint was peeling, and someone had carved initials into one armrest. I took out the salad and rolls and ate slowly, watching kids chase each other near the playground. Their laughter floated across the grass, soft and distant. For a long time, I just sat there, breathing. It would have been easy to replay Emily's words in my head, over and over, until they dug deeper. Instead, I stared at a tree branch swaying in the wind and tried to think about nothing. My phone was in my pocket, still on silent. I almost forgot about it until I felt it buzz suddenly against my leg. Once, twice, a call. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. The number had no name attached, just digits. The area code was from New York. The phone kept buzzing in my hand, the unknown New York number staring back at me like it expected an answer. I watched it ring. Part of me thought it might be a scam. Another part wondered if it could be about some debt I had forgotten. When your life falls apart, you start to expect bad news whenever something unexpected happens. I let it ring until it stopped. For a moment, I just sat there on the park bench, listening to the quiet after the vibration ended. My thumb hovered over the screen, waiting to see if a voicemail notification would pop up. Nothing came. Just the same old list of missed calls and messages from months ago that I already knew by heart. I slid the phone back into my pocket. It was easier to believe that call was a mistake than to believe it might be something important. Important things did not seem to happen to me anymore, not in a good way. I leaned back and looked up at the gray sky. It reminded me of the old office ceiling tiles from my job before all of this. I used to stare at those tiles when conference calls went too long. Back then, my biggest worry was a delayed shipment or a client who wanted a discount. Before the layoffs, I was a logistics coordinator for a mid-sized company. It was not glamorous, but it was solid. We moved products from one place to another and made sure everything arrived when it should. I liked the sense of order, trucks, schedules, routes, pieces of a puzzle I could solve. I was good at it. My performance reviews said I was reliable, steady, the kind of person managers liked because they never had to worry about surprises. I met Emily during those stable years. She worked in marketing for the same company. I first noticed her at the copy machine, arguing softly with the machine like it was a stubborn child. Later, she laughed about it in the break room and said the printer hated her. It was the kind of simple joke people make at work, but I liked the way she smiled when she told it. We started eating lunch at the same table. Simple stuff. Sandwiches, coffee, talking about traffic and weekend plans. She said she wanted to move up in the company, maybe run her own team one day. I said I was happy where I was, as long as the work stayed honest and organized. She told me she liked that about me. At least that was what she said back then. Our first date was cheap pizza and a walk by the river. I remember looking at her as she talked about her dreams and feeling sure I was the luckiest man alive. She said I grounded her. She said I made her feel safe. We got married 3 years later in a small ceremony, nothing fancy. A rented hall, some folding chairs, a borrowed speaker for the music. I still thought it was perfect. We rented a small apartment first, then moved into a nicer one as we both advanced a little. Emily got good at presentations and office politics. She moved up faster than I did, but that never bothered me. I was proud of her. I said that many times. We talked about buying a house one day. She wanted a place with a big kitchen and a white fence. I wanted a garage and a quiet corner where I could set up a desk. We both nodded and said those things would come if we just kept working hard. The company started struggling before I saw it on paper. Schedules got tighter. The warehouse shifted to cheaper materials. Meetings started to include phrases like cost-cutting and restructuring. At first, it was just background noise. Then it became real. One morning, I was called into a manager's office. The manager looked tired, like he had already had this conversation too many times that day. He said there had been downsizing. He said positions were being eliminated. He said my role was no longer required. He also said it was nothing personal. That part stuck with me. I walked out with a cardboard box holding my coffee mug, a couple of framed photos, and a stack of pointless notebooks. People avoided eye contact as I passed their desks. Emily texted me later and asked if we could talk that night. At home, I tried to explain the severance package. It was not enough, but it was something. I told Emily we had savings, that I would find something else. Maybe not as good, but enough to keep us going until things improved. She nodded, but her face had a tightness around the mouth I had never seen before. She said she trusted me. Her tone made it clear she needed proof. I woke up early the next day and the next, sending out applications, scrolling through listings, chasing anything that seemed even close to my experience. Delivery jobs, warehouse work, night shifts. I updated my resume so many times it stopped looking like a real description of a person. The first month, Emily was gentle. She told me things would work out. She rubbed my shoulders when I got home from temporary shifts. She told her friends I was between jobs. The second month, the tone changed. She started to ask exact numbers. How many jobs had I applied for that day? How many interviews did I have next week? She pointed out small things she thought I could do better. She said I should be more aggressive, more bold, less comfortable. It was strange hearing that word used as an insult. The third month, she joined a new gym. She said she needed a positive routine, something to keep her energy up. She talked about it a lot. The trainer there, the classes, the progress she was making. She posted photos of herself after workouts, smiling and flushed, with a man in the background who always seemed to be standing a little too close. That was Ryan. At first, he was just a name. Then he became a constant presence in her stories. She said Ryan pushed her to be her best. She said he believed in her potential. She did not say she believed in mine anymore. Bills still had to be paid. My savings started to thin. I took any short-term work I could find. Loading trucks overnight, helping at a warehouse across town, doing small delivery routes in an old rental van. I came home with sore feet and a brain full of schedules that were not mine anymore. Emily's world moved in the opposite direction. New gym clothes, new hair appointments, work events where she came home smelling like expensive food and wine. She said networking was important. She said this was her chance to finally step into the life she deserved. Sometimes when we argued, she used that phrase. She said she was tired of feeling dragged down. She said she could not keep carrying the weight of my uncertainty. She said she felt like my mother, not my wife. Once, in front of her friends during a dinner at our place, she joked that she was the only adult in the house. Everyone laughed. I forced a smile. After they left, I told her that comment hurt. She said I was too sensitive and told me it had just been a joke. Words like that are never just jokes. I remember one night very clearly. I came home late from a small job that barely covered the gas it took to get there. I found her sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. On the coffee table were 2 wine glasses, only one with any wine left. There was a gym bag on the floor that was not hers. She told me Ryan had stopped by to drop off a nutrition plan for her. She said I must have just missed him. Her voice sounded annoyed, as if my timing was somehow the problem. I did not argue. I was too tired. A week later, she told me she thought we needed a break. She said she could not stand the tension anymore. She said she needed to focus on herself. She said maybe some space would give me clarity. She used a lot of words that sounded like therapy phrases, but all I heard was distance. The break became something else very fast. Her lawyer contacted me before I even had time to suggest counseling. Papers arrived that laid everything out in neat legal language. Support, division of property, termination of this or that. She had highlighted sections she wanted me to notice. I could have fought more. I could have argued about the furniture, the car, the savings we had built together. But the truth was, my energy was already spent. I signed where she and her lawyer told me to sign. I packed my clothes and a few long-kept books into boxes. I left our apartment with less than I had brought into it years before. When we signed the final papers at the courthouse, she barely looked at me. On the way out, she laughed when she told someone on the phone that she was finally free. She said she could now find a man who matched her ambition. Later, when she told me no one would ever love a broke man like me, it felt less like a new wound and more like a summary of everything she had been thinking for months. After the divorce, I tried to keep going. I rented a small room with the last of my savings and kept looking for full-time work. But the jobs got thinner and the bills stayed thick. When the room was gone, I tried couch surfing with an old friend. When that ended, I moved into the shelter system. Shelter beds are not always guaranteed. Rules change. Funding shifts. Some nights I found a spot. Some nights I did not. Park benches became familiar. So did the backs of grocery stores and warm air vents near buildings. The soup kitchen became one of the few stable things in my life. I went there most days for lunch. They served simple food on plastic trays. The room always had a mix of smells, cooked vegetables, cleaning supplies, too many people in one place. Some volunteers came and went. Others stayed longer. Sandra was one of the regulars. She was in her early 30s, always wearing the same faded green apron over different shirts. She seemed to know everyone's name, or at least tried to. She talked to me a few times as she passed out plates. She said I seemed quieter than most. I told her I used to work in logistics. She said that made sense because I always stacked my dishes neatly at the end. That afternoon, after the cafe incident, I walked into the soup kitchen later than usual. My head felt heavy from replaying Emily and Ryan's faces. I took a tray, nodded at Sandra, and moved through the line. The food was stew and bread. I sat at a corner table and ate slowly, more out of habit than hunger. My phone sat in my pocket, the memory of that New York call still poking at the edge of my thoughts. I had just finished my bread when I felt someone touch my shoulder lightly. I turned. Sandra stood beside me, leaning down a little so others would not easily hear. She said there was a man in a suit at the door asking if I was here. Sandra did not usually look nervous, but that day her eyes kept flicking toward the main doors as she spoke. She wiped her hands on her apron and said I should go see for myself. because the man would not talk to anyone else. For a second, I thought about pretending I wasn't there. My first guess was that he was from a collection agency or some government office following up on something I had forgotten I owed. Trouble in a suit. That sounded about right for my life, but hiding wouldn't fix anything. It never had before. I put my tray away, stood up, and walked toward the entrance of the soup kitchen. The hallway smelled like bleach and old coffee. I could hear voices from outside, cars passing on the street, a bus braking at the corner. At the glass door, I saw him. He stood on the sidewalk, a gray overcoat over a dark suit, a leather briefcase at his side. His hair was mostly silver, neat, like someone who still cared about small details. He did not look like he belonged in this neighborhood, at least not on this side of the line. He spotted me through the glass and straightened a little. His eyes were careful, not judgmental, just measuring. I stepped out into the cold. The wind hit my face again, sharp. The door clicked shut behind me. "You're Michael Thompson?" he asked. His voice was calm, low, like he was used to talking in rooms where people actually listened. "Yes," I said. It came out more unsure than I liked, so I cleared my throat and repeated it. "Yeah, that's me." He nodded once, like he was checking something off a list. He said his name was Laurent Parker, that he was an attorney based in New York. He spoke slowly, giving the word space, like he knew I was trying to process each one. I stared at his tie, at the small pattern on the fabric. It looked expensive in the quiet kind of way rich people learn. "Right," I said. "And what does an attorney from New York want with me?" He glanced at the door behind me, at the soup kitchen sign, then back to my face. If he had any reaction to where he had found me, he hid it well. He asked if we could talk somewhere a little more private, maybe just around the corner where it was quieter. "No pressure," he said. "Nothing bad." He added that last part without smiling, but there was something gentle in the way he said it. I hesitated, then nodded. If he was trouble, he felt like professional trouble, not the random kind. That, somehow, was less scary. We walked down to the end of the block, where there was a small side street with a short row of bare trees. There were no benches, just a low concrete ledge around a planter. He gestured, and I sat. He remained standing, opening his briefcase with practiced movements. From inside, he took out a slim folder and a business card. He handed me the card first. I turned it over in my fingers. Thick paper, raised letters, his name, the law firm, a Manhattan address, phone numbers. It looked real. That didn't mean much on its own, but it was something. He said he represented the estate of a man named Arthur Hale. The name took a second to travel from his mouth to my memory. It landed somewhere dusty and old, like a box at the back of a closet. "Arthur," I said slowly. "Arthur Hale?" Parker nodded. I thought of my mother's voice from years ago, telling stories at the kitchen table when I was too young to pay full attention. Crazy Uncle Arthur, she called him sometimes, but there was respect under the word crazy. He had moved to New York before I was born, built something big in finance or real estate or whatever adult world kids don't understand. He came to one family reunion when I was 12. I remembered a tall man in a dark blazer, speaking quietly while everyone else got loud around him. He had slipped me a $20 bill at the end of the day and told me to keep it for something important. I had used it to buy a science kit I'd wanted for months. We had exchanged a couple of letters when I was a teenager. He had liked that I took school seriously. He wrote in neat, small handwriting and gave simple advice. Save more than you spend, read everything, never ignore the fine print. Then life got busy, and the letters stopped. I had not thought about him in years. "He passed away recently," Parker said. "I'm sorry to tell you that this way." I nodded. It felt strange to grieve for someone who had been almost a story, not a regular person in my life. But I did feel something, a small, quiet sadness. "Okay," I said. "So why are you here?" Parker opened the folder. I saw the edge of a document with official-looking letterhead, but he didn't show it fully yet. He said that Arthur had left a will. That part made sense. Men in suits always leave wills. Then he said my name was in it. Actually, he said my name was at the center of it. I blinked. "At the center?" He said Arthur had named me as his primary heir. Executor of the will, he added, plus beneficiary. Properties, accounts, investments. He used words like substantial and extensive. He said numbers that sounded too large to belong in any sentence connected to my name. My brain tried to slot that information into some pattern I knew, but there was nothing for it to connect to. I was a man who had eaten dumpster salad that morning. Nothing about me said heir. I told him there had to be a mistake. He said he had tracked me through old family records, employment history, driver's license information. He had gone to my last rental address and learned I no longer lived there. It took a while, he said, but he had eventually found a note about a shelter intake, and from there, he had followed the trail to the soup kitchen. He said all of that like it was just part of the job, but my head spun at the idea that someone had gone through that much trouble to find me. I asked him why. Because the will names you, he said simply, and because there is a condition that cannot be met without you. There it was, the catch. I stared at the folder the way you look at a door that might open to something bright or to a long drop. What kind of condition? I asked. He shook his head very slightly. He said the specifics were to be discussed in his office with proper paperwork and witnesses. His tone was firm, but not harsh. This was procedure, not a trick. He did tell me one thing, though. The estate could not be distributed unless I was present and agreed to certain terms. If I refused, the assets would be redirected somewhere else. I let those words sit between us in the cold air. Estate, assets, terms. They sounded like parts of someone else's life. Behind us, a car horn blared somewhere on the main road. A dog barked twice and went quiet. The world kept moving like nothing had changed, even though my day had split cleanly in half. You expect me to just believe this, I said, more to myself than to him. He said he understood it was a lot. He said anyone in my position would doubt it. Then he offered to show me the first page of the will. Not all the details, just enough to prove he was not making it up. He turned the folder slightly so I could see. There was Arthur's full name, the date, the firm's letterhead, and then, in clear letters, I, Arthur James Hale, hereby name my great-nephew, Michael Thompson, as... I stopped reading. My eyes burned suddenly, and I realized I had been holding my breath. I pulled back. My heart was beating strangely fast. Parker closed the folder again. He said he had a train back to New York that evening. He gave me his card and said that if I wanted to hear the full terms, I could call him. He also said, very calmly, that walking away was an option. It was my choice. I laughed once. A short, breathless sound. The idea that I still had choices felt unreal. He checked his watch, then asked if I had any questions. I had 1,000, but most of them did not have words yet, so I just asked the simplest one. Why me? I said. He studied my face for a second. Then he said Arthur had talked about me more than I would think, given how little we had seen each other. He said Arthur respected people who did their duty without fanfare, people who showed up quietly when life got hard. He added that Arthur hadn't liked how some members of the family behaved when money was involved. He did not say which ones, but I could guess. After that, there was not much left to say. He repeated his offer. I could call, I could come to New York, or not. It was up to me. He walked away down the sidewalk, his coat moving with each step, the folder tucked back into his briefcase. He did not look back. I sat on the concrete ledge for a long minute, staring at his business card. My fingers had gone numb from the cold, but I barely felt it. New York, estate, condition. It was like someone had taken my life, crumpled it, and then smoothed it out in a completely new shape. I slid the card into my pocket and stood up slowly. My legs felt unsteady, like they had forgotten how to handle anything new. On the way back toward the main street, I turned the corner a little too quickly and walked straight into a small group of people. My shoulder knocked against someone's arm. I muttered an automatic apology and stepped back. Then I saw who it was. Emily. Her cream coat, her careful hair, the same familiar perfume. She stood with 2 of her friends from the old company. Beside her, of course, was Ryan. He wore a fitted jacket that showed off the work he did in the gym. He held a takeout coffee, the logo from some trendy place glowing against the cup. For 1 second, all of us froze. Then Emily's mouth curled up. She looked me up and down, from my worn shoes to my unshaved face. Her gaze stopped briefly on Parker's card, sticking halfway out of my pocket. Well, she said slowly, dragging the word out like she was tasting it. Look who's still hanging around this side of town. Her friends shifted awkwardly, but none of them stepped away. Ryan smirked. He always smirked. It was like his face thought it was the main character in a cheap commercial. He asked if I was following them. He said it like a joke, but there was a sharpness in his eyes. People like him hated being reminded that the floor could drop out from under anyone. I said it was a public street and that I was just walking. Emily's friends glanced at each other. One of them raised her phone a little, just low enough that it could have been nothing, or recording. Emily asked if I had found a job yet. Her tone was light, but the question had teeth. She said some people from the old office wondered where I'd ended up. She said she tried to defend me, but it was hard when there was no success story to share. Ryan laughed. He said I looked like the before picture of one of his clients. He joked that maybe he could give me a free consultation, if I could pay him in something besides sadness. I felt my fists clench, then force them to relax. I would not give him that satisfaction. I told him I was managing. Emily's eyes flicked again to the business card in my pocket. She asked if someone was finally offering me work. She said I should take anything I could get because, in her words, it was not like I could afford to be picky. Behind her, a bus pulled up. People stepped off and walked around us, glancing briefly at the little scene in the middle of the sidewalk. Ryan took out his phone and held it up in front of him. He angled it so his face filled most of the frame, with me blurry in the background. He called it a reminder never to settle, and Emily laughed. He said later they might send the video to some of our old co-workers, just for a laugh. That was the moment something finally shifted inside me. Not the divorce papers, not the dumpster, not even the cafe earlier that day. It was the sight of his phone. My life turned into scenery in his little performance. My chest did not burn with rage. It felt cold, clear, like a window had opened in a stuffy room. I realized then that I was done defending myself to these people. I was done explaining, apologizing, or hoping they would remember who I used to be. They had already rewritten me into a cautionary tale, a story they could tell at parties to feel better about their own choices. Let them, I thought, let them talk. Because now there was another story starting, one they knew nothing about. I stepped back out of the frame of his camera without a word. Ryan made a little disappointed noise like I had ruined his shot. Emily shook her head as if I had failed her one last time. She mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that she and Ryan were having an engagement party soon. Some fancy hotel downtown, she said, as if the details mattered to me. She told her friends it would be nice to finally celebrate with people who were going somewhere. I listened, filed the information away, and said nothing. When they walked off, laughing, I stayed where I was for a moment. The sidewalk felt more solid under my feet than it had in months. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the business card again. Laurent Parker, New York, executor of the estate of Arthur Hale. Next to it, I felt a folded piece of paper he had slipped me as we parted, a sealed envelope with my name written on it in neat, precise handwriting. On the back, in small print, were the words, "Estate condition. Do not open until meeting." I turned the envelope between my fingers, feeling the thickness of the paper, the weight of it. Then I put it carefully back into my pocket and started walking. When I started walking that day, I didn't have a destination. I just knew I couldn't go back to the park bench and sit there like nothing had changed. There was a business card in my pocket, an envelope with my name on it, and the echo of Emily's laugh still ringing in my ears. I walked for almost an hour, past bus stops, past storefronts full of things I could not buy, past people arguing into their phones and couples holding hands. The city felt the same, but my mind didn't. Eventually, I ended up in front of the public library. I hadn't been inside in months. When you're focused on finding your next meal and a place to sleep, books drop down the list of priorities. But the library had something I needed: warmth, quiet, and computers. Inside, the air smelled like old paper and cleaning products. I checked my reflection in the glass of a display case. I still looked worn out, but at least I could smooth my hair and zip my jacket before going to the computer area. I sat at a station and typed the law firm name from Parker's card into the search bar. The website that came up looked professional and boring in the exact way real firms usually do. There was a page with his photo and biography, years of experience, estate planning, corporate law, no red flags. My hands hovered over the keyboard. It would have been easy to close the browser and pretend this wasn't happening. But easy choices were what had let my life slide underneath me without a fight. I took out my phone and dialed the number on the card. Parker answered after a couple of rings. His voice sounded the same as before, calm and measured. He asked if I had considered his offer. I told him I had, and that I wanted to come to New York. The words felt heavy, but once they were out, something in my chest loosened. He said he could arrange transportation. He had a way of saying practical things that made impossible ideas sound as simple as ordering lunch. He took down some details, then asked if I had any identification with me. I said I still had my old driver's license. The address was outdated, but the picture was mine. He said that was enough for now. By the end of the call, he had given me a train departure time for the next morning and said there would be a ticket waiting at the station office under my name. He also said there would be a small clothing allowance in cash when I arrived. He didn't say it as charity, he said it like any other line item on a checklist. After I hung up, I sat there listening to the soft hum of the library. A part of me kept waiting for someone to jump out and yell that this was a prank. But nothing happened. People just kept reading, typing, living their regular lives. That night I found a bed at the shelter. It was noisy as usual, someone coughing, someone snoring, someone muttering in their sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, one hand wrapped around my backpack strap. I thought about Arthur, about the one family reunion he came to. He had stayed a little apart from the chaos, watching everyone with a small smile, like he was studying a complicated chart. I wondered what he would say if he saw me now, lying in a row of metal bunk beds, about to ride a train I couldn't afford to a city I hadn't visited in years. In the morning, I showed up at the station early. I had washed up as best I could in the shelter bathroom, combed my hair with my fingers, and brushed my teeth with the little travel kit I kept in my backpack. It wasn't much, but it helped. At the ticket window, I gave my name. The clerk checked the screen, then handed me an envelope. Inside was a printed ticket and a small handwritten note with Parker's initials. Just that. No extra message. On the train, I took a window seat and watched my city slide away. Brick buildings, parking lots, rows of houses, then open stretches of land. I tried not to think about what would happen if all of this turned out to be some bureaucratic mistake. I told myself that even then, I would at least have tried. Hours passed in a blur of fields and small towns. I dozed and woke up and dozed again. At some point, a memory from the old office came back. A training seminar where a man in a suit told us that change is opportunity. Back then, I rolled my eyes at that kind of phrase. Now I understood that change just meant something different, and what you did with it was on you. When the train finally pulled into New York, the noise hit first. Announcements over the speaker. People talking, hurrying, bumping into each other. The station smelled like metal, coffee, and something fried. I followed the flow of people until I reached the main hall. I was still trying to get my bearings when I spotted another suit. Not Parker. This one was younger, holding a small sign with my name on it. He told me he was from the firm. He said Mr. Parker had sent him to meet me, and there was a car waiting. The way he spoke, I could tell he did this often, but the name on the sign made this time different. The car ride through the city was almost unreal. I hadn't seen so many tall buildings in a long time, glass and steel and people everywhere. The driver didn't talk much. I didn't either. I just watched. We pulled up in front of a tall building with mirrored windows. The law firm's name was on a small plaque near the entrance. Inside, everything was polished. The floor, the reception desk, even the calm smile of the woman behind it. She called Parker's office, spoke quietly, then pointed me toward an elevator. The ride up felt too smooth. My ears popped just a little, a reminder I had come a long way from the soup kitchen. Parker's office was neat without being flashy. There was a large desk, 2 chairs, a bookshelf lined with thick volumes, and a window with a view of other glass towers. He stood when I came in and shook my hand like he had been expecting me all along. He pointed me to a chair and asked if I wanted anything to drink. I said water. It felt safer than coffee or tea. On the desk were several files stacked in tidy piles. One of them had my name on a label. Seeing my name in that tidy, professional print made my stomach flip. Parker thanked me for coming, then said we would go over the basics of the estate first. He mentioned properties. An apartment in the city, a house somewhere upstate, some commercial spaces. He talked about investments, accounts, holdings. He used numbers that didn't feel real, but he spoke about them like ordinary items on a list. I listened, but part of my mind kept drifting. It was like sitting through a meeting about someone else's project. My name kept dragging me back into it. Every few minutes, he checked if I understood. I nodded. My logistics brain still worked. Assets going here, forms filed there, steps, sequences, deadlines. It was just a different kind of cargo. Then he rested his hand on a thinner folder to one side. This one had a small red sticker on the corner. He said this was the part connected to the condition. My throat tightened. He didn't open it yet. He said we would not go into the full details that day. There were formalities to prepare first. Temporary access to accounts, a place for me to stay, arrangement for basic needs. He said it would be easier to discuss the condition once I had had a chance to rest and see at least some of what Arthur had left. He must have seen something in my face, because he added that nothing in the condition involved anything illegal or dangerous. It was about character, he said, about dignity. Arthur, I thought, and that sounded like him. Parker then slid a small envelope across the desk. Inside was a prepaid card with enough money to cover clothes, food, and basic items. He also handed me an access key card with the name of a building printed under it. He said it was for the penthouse. The word felt heavy in my hand. He explained that the apartment had been Arthur's primary residence. For now, I could stay there. It made sense, he said, because I needed a place while the rest of the estate matters were sorted out. I looked at the key card, then at him. I told him I wasn't sure I belonged in a place like that. He replied that, legally speaking, it already belonged to me more than to anyone else. His tone was dry, but there was a hint of warmth there. He asked if I was up for seeing it that day, or if I would prefer to wait. I said if we waited, I might lose my nerve. He nodded, stood, and picked up his coat. On the ride over, he took a call about another case. I watched the city again through the window. Up close, it was even more intense. Horns, delivery trucks, people walking with purpose. Somewhere in all of that, my name was now on deeds and documents I hadn't touched yet. The penthouse building was in a part of the city I had only ever seen in movies. The lobby had marble floors and soft lighting. The doorman greeted Parker by name and handed him a small stack of mail. We took a private elevator up. At the top, the doors opened into a hallway with only one door at the end. Parker tapped the keycard against a small panel. There was a beep, and the door unlocked. Inside, the air was still. I stepped onto polished wood floors and stopped. The living room had floor-to-ceiling windows with a view that made my chest tighten. The city stretched out in every direction, buildings rising and falling like waves. The furniture was simple, but clearly expensive. There were bookshelves lining one wall, filled with neat rows of hardcovers. A framed photo sat on a side table. Arthur, a little older than I remembered, standing in front of the same windows, a faint smile on his face. Parker gave me space to walk around. I moved slowly, like I was afraid any sudden step would break something. There was a kitchen with more equipment than I knew how to use. A bedroom with a bed so big it looked like its own territory. A small office with a desk, a leather chair, and another view of the city. On that desk, there was a single object. A closed, dark blue folder with my name pressed into the cover in silver letters. I didn't touch it. Not yet. Parker told me there was food in the fridge, basics stocked by the building staff. He said the firm had arranged for some new clothes to be delivered later that day. He also said that if I wanted, someone could help me go through practical things, ID renewal, banking, all of that. I asked him what he needed from me right now. He said, for the moment, nothing more than this. Rest, think, and be ready to talk in a couple of days. He would send me an email with a time for a more formal meeting, where we would discuss next steps and, eventually, the condition. He mentioned that it was important I understood everything before I agreed to it. His tone was serious now. When he left, the penthouse felt too quiet. I walked back to the office and stood in front of the desk. The city lights were starting to come on outside, little squares of yellow and white in the growing dark. I finally sat in the leather chair. It was softer than anything I had sat on in months. My hands rested on my knees. I could feel the weight of my own body in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. My phone buzzed faintly in my pocket. I took it out and saw a new email notification from Parker's firm. The subject line read, Meeting invitation, estate condition discussion, in person only. The subject line of the email sat on my phone screen for a long time while I just stared at it. Meeting invitation, estate condition discussion, in person only. I read it again and again, as if the words might change into something easier, like a simple request for a signature. They did not. I put the phone down on the big desk in the penthouse office and let my eyes move to the window. Outside, the city lights glowed against the early evening sky. Cars moved along the streets like streams of red and white. Somewhere down there was the soup kitchen. Somewhere down there was the alley with the dumpster. Somewhere down there, Emily and Ryan were telling a version of my story that made them feel strong. Here, in this quiet room, my name was pressed in silver on a folder. I slept better that night than I had in months, but it was still not perfect. My body kept waking up out of habit, expecting noise, hard surfaces, the need to protect my belongings. Each time, I had to remind myself that the door here had a lock that only I could open, and no one was going to bump my bunk or tell me to move. In the morning, I put on the clean clothes that had been delivered. Simple, nothing flashy, but new. That alone felt strange. The fabric did not have the stiffness of worry in it yet. At the law firm, they led me to a different room, not Parker's office this time. It was a conference room with a long table, quiet art on the walls, and a view of another building's glass side. There were 2 glasses of water, a stack of papers I was not allowed to read yet, and the familiar slim folder with the red sticker. Parker came in with a thin laptop and some kind of tablet. He greeted me in that same calm way and asked how the first night had been. I told him it felt like sleeping in someone else's life. He said that was a normal feeling in situations like this. He explained that we were now at the point where he needed to tell me, clearly, what the condition was that Arthur had left. He said the legal language was formal and a bit heavy, so he would describe it in regular terms first, then show me the exact text later if I still wanted to go forward. He said Arthur had watched people in the family for many years. He had seen how they behaved when someone failed or when money was involved. He had not liked what he saw. He had worried that if he simply gave his estate to the next generation, it would only feed the worst parts of them. So he had decided that the person who received the bulk of his estate had to show something specific before anything was final. Not charm, not business skill, something simpler. He had written that his heir had to stand publicly in front of those who had treated him as less than and reclaim his own name with truth and dignity. There had to be witnesses outside the family. There had to be no lies, no shouting, no violence. Just facts. The person from the firm overseeing the estate had to be present and had to confirm that the requirement was fulfilled. As Parker spoke, I felt one part of my mind listening to the details and another part quietly clicking pieces into place. Arthur knew something about people and power. He knew which systems actually mattered when the noise faded. Parker added that the condition did not name specific individuals. It did not say I had to confront one person or another. It simply described those who have publicly erased or humiliated you in a way that impacts your standing as a person. He said the idea was that I would know who that meant when the time came. I did know, too well. He asked if I understood. I said I did. In simple words, I had to choose a time and place, stand in front of people who saw me as a joke, and calmly show them the truth, with him there to witness it. He nodded. Then he said the condition also connected to how the estate would be used. A large part of it was for me, yes, but another part was set aside for causes Arthur cared about. He had come from nothing and did not want his money to die in bank accounts. If I accepted the inheritance, I would also be accepting responsibility for that part, managing donations, setting up support for people who needed it. That part made sense to me in a way that felt solid. I knew what it was like to be on the other end of lines and forms, hoping some distant office would decide in my favor. The idea of being able to tilt the world even a little away from that kind of fear felt right. Parker said we did not need to decide everything that day. We could set up the structure over time. But the condition, the public act, had to happen before the estate could be fully executed. Until then, everything was in a kind of holding pattern. He finally opened the folder with the red sticker and turned it toward himself. I saw lines of text, but from where I sat, I could not read the exact words. That might have been on purpose. He read parts of it out loud in a formal tone, the phrases about dignity, public setting, no false statements. It matched what he had just told me in simpler terms. Then he asked me if I was willing to accept. I sat there with my hands folded and thought about the cafe, the sidewalk, the way Ryan had filmed me, the way Emily had turned my whole collapse into a story about her strength. I thought about the phrase she had used, the one that had stuck like a small stone in my shoe. No one will ever love a broke man like you. I told Parker I would do it. He nodded once and slid a stack of papers toward me. These, he explained, were acknowledgments that I had been informed of the condition, that I understood I could refuse the estate, that I knew the firm's role in all of it. The usual legal trail. He did not ask me to read every line then. He suggested that I could review them later in the penthouse if I wanted, but for now he pointed to the places where my signature was required to move the process forward. I signed. Michael Thompson in blue ink, one time, then again and again. The sound of the pen scratching on the paper was steady. My hand did not shake. Over the next days, things became practical. Parker arranged for me to meet a small group of people who managed Arthur's charitable interests. We sat around another conference table, this time in a different office, one with posters about outreach and community programs on the walls. They told me about the projects Arthur had supported, scholarships, food banks, housing initiatives. They talked about his idea of a fund that would help people right at the edge, those who had fallen through cracks but still wanted to climb. I listened and thought of the shelter, the soup kitchen, Sandra's tired but kind face. I did not promise anything yet, but I asked questions. I wanted to understand exactly how the money moved from the account to the table where someone sat with a plastic tray. Later, back at the penthouse, I started building my own kind of plan. The office desk became a small command center. I laid out blank notepads, pens, sticky notes. I created simple labels the way I used to do at work: past, present, proof, people. Under past, I wrote down everything that had led to this point: job loss, divorce, shelters, alleyways. Under people, I listed names: Emily, Ryan, old coworkers, Sandra, the shelter staff, the lawyer. Under proof, I left space. This, I knew from logistics work, was the heart of any operation. You needed facts, you needed paper trails, you needed timelines that could not be bent by someone else's story. The next day, with help from Parker's assistants, I began to gather them. We requested certified copies of the divorce documents. We asked for official records showing why my old job had ended, which clearly stated that it had been part of a reduction in force, not misconduct. We printed past bank statements showing where the money had gone during those last months. We did not talk much about the content, we just built the stack. I checked Emily's social media from the penthouse computer. She had not blocked me. I was not important enough to block, I guessed. I saw photos of her and Ryan at expensive restaurants, in hotel lobbies, at the gym, motivational captions about leveling up and never letting others drag you down. One post announced their engagement in front of a mirror in some fancy lobby. She wore a ring I had never seen before. They both smiled wide. The caption talked about how she had finally found someone who matched her energy and ambition. Another post gave details about an upcoming engagement party. Location, a hotel ballroom downtown, dress code, formal. Her words said she could not wait to celebrate with real partners and real adults. I stared at the name of the hotel for a long time. I knew that place. I had once coordinated a shipment of equipment for an event there. I knew how big the ballroom was, how the sound carried, where the doors were. I added one more word under present venue. At our next meeting, I described the engagement party to Parker. I told him that the people who had most loudly erased me would all be in one room there, surrounded by witnesses. I asked him, very simply, if that would satisfy the condition. He thought for a moment. Then he said that if I used that event to calmly present truthful information about who I was and what had actually happened, and if he could confirm that the requirement for dignity had been met, then yes, it could fulfill the condition. He also reminded me that this was not about revenge in the way most people think of it. It was not about shouting or making anyone cry. It was about truth. It was about taking back the story that had been stolen from me. I told him I understood. I said I had no interest in screaming. I had done enough of that on the inside already. The question left was how to get into the event. I did not have an invitation. I had seen the announcement only because I still technically followed Emily's account online. It was a formal party, the kind of thing where they checked names at the door. I looked again at the list of people on my desk and circled a name, Tom Barlow, my former coworker. Tom had never joined in when others gossiped about me. Once, during the early days of my job search, he had met me for coffee and told me quietly that the layoffs were not my fault. He had said if he heard of anything, he would let me know. I called him from the office phone. My voice felt steadier now than the last time we'd spoken. I told him I was in a new situation and asked if he had a moment. He did. He sounded surprised, but genuinely glad to hear from me. I did not tell him everything about the estate. I just said I was sorting a lot of old pieces of my life and needed a small favor connected to Emily's upcoming event. I asked if he knew anyone on the guest list. He said he did. He mentioned that some of the old team had been invited because Emily still kept in touch with management. I asked him if he could do one simple thing. Tell the planner that my name had to be added to the list as a guest, quietly, no fuss. I said I would cover the cost if there was a per-person charge. He hesitated for a moment, then he said he could probably make a call. He asked me if I was sure I wanted to go to that kind of event. I told him that, for once, I was very sure. In the days that followed, I prepared the way I used to prepare for major logistics rollouts. Everything had to be in place. Confirmation from the hotel that I was on the list, travel plans back to my city, the right clothes, the right timing. Parker booked his own travel without asking many questions about the personal details. He said he would be there as the estate representative and as a legal witness. He would bring whatever files were necessary for his part, but he would not speak unless I asked him to. This, he said, was my moment, not his. On my last evening in New York before the trip back, I stood on the penthouse balcony. The wind was sharp but clean. The city hummed far below. I thought about Emily's words about no one loving a broke man. I thought about the men in suits who now waited for my decisions before moving millions. Money had not turned me into a different person. It had given me tools, that was all. When the day of the engagement party came, I traveled back to my city wearing a dark suit that fit, a coat that stopped the wind, and shoes without holes. No one on the train looked at me twice. I was just another man heading somewhere. The hotel lobby was bright, all marble and glass. People in formal clothes moved toward the ballroom, laughing, adjusting ties, smoothing dresses. Music drifted out in soft waves when the doors opened and closed. At the check-in table, a woman with a tablet asked for my name. I said it, and she checked the list. Her expression did not change. She said I was on it and gave me a small card with my table number. That was all. Behind me, I heard Parker's calm voice as he gave his own name. The staff checked and nodded. I felt strangely calm as I walked toward the ballroom doors. There was no shaking in my hands, no tremor in my chest. It felt like the moment before a freight shipment rolled out on a route I had planned down to the minute. After that, the cargo went where it was meant to go. A staff member in a black jacket pulled one of the tall doors open. Lights spilled out across the hallway, along with music and the buzz of conversation. I stepped through. The door swung slowly shut behind me with a soft click that sounded, to me, louder than anything else in the room. I waited until the toasts ended, then walked up and, in a calm voice, explained who I now was. Sole heir to Arthur Hale. Owner of the penthouse, the accounts, the businesses. Parker confirmed it, laying documents on the table beside the cake. I stated the truth about my job loss, the divorce, their mockery. Guests went silent, parents walked out. And as I left, every phone in the room pointed at them, not me.